I mean, if Sound of Freedom is playing in one of those theaters, I would say go see that. Mission Impossible:
Dude,
Dead
I've been
Reckoning
seeing a
was
lot of
actually
weird
really
stuff
good.
about Sound of Freedom, though. Like, apparently, even theaters are trying not to play the movie.
Okay, I can explain to you 100% of why that's happening. It's not a conspiracy theory.
I want you to explain this
All right.
in detail
This
because I
so
busted
yeah.
out the tinfoil hat for this one.
So I worked at AMC for a decade. And for when I was there, this happened a lot with the Tyler Perry movies. And this was because Tyler Perry was an independent filmmaker at the time, meaning he didn't have a major distributor. He was putting movies out there, he was independently distributing them to the different theaters across the country. It wasn't Disney, it wasn't Sony, it wasn't Warner Brothers, right? They didn't have that. So when Tyler Perry movies would get booked, if it was summertime, they would get booked for the smallest, crappiest theater that we had because that was the one that was open. Tom Cruise was arguing about how all the IMAX theaters are now going to Oppenheimer, and he wanted Mission Impossible to still be in there. And that's because these distributors make deals to be on those screens for a certain number of weeks when they open. So when Sound of Freedom right now is getting into these theaters, they're not getting into the nice theaters. They're getting into the theaters that are available because it's summertime. So here's what's happening. Movie theaters are not a high margin business. You don't make a ton of money. What you do in the movie theaters when you're not a high margin business is you skimp on maintenance. You don't do the required preventative maintenance. You don't fix things when you have to if you don't need to. When the Tyler Perry movies would come out and we were putting them in those crappy theaters because that's what they were getting booked into, guess which theaters weren't getting their air conditioning units serviced on the regular? It's summertime in Virginia. The air conditioning units are now we're in sellout theaters.
That theater room is going to be 98 degrees by 30 minutes into the movie.
And you are 100% correct. So we would put signs up to let people know. And people would think that it was a racist conspiracy, and that's what they were yelling about then. It was like, no, this is the theater it got booked in. It's got the air conditioners broke. Would you rather we don't show the movie because we don't have any other screen? So what's happening to Sound of Freedom? When it's getting booked into these theaters, it's being put into the theaters that have the least maintenance being done on them. And so when you've got thousands of screens across the country and you're putting them in disproportionately the theaters that have the least maintenance done.
Yeah, they're booked into the shittiest room.
And remember, now the people going to see this movie are hyper aware, and so they're looking for things that are broken. I guarantee you, if I walked into the nicest, biggest theater AMC has, I could point out to you 7 or 8 things that are broken and not working the way they're supposed to. But you kind of look past it because you're just watching the movie, right? So the sound system, I've been in the big theaters where the sound system doesn't work.
As long as you bring me my tall boy full of Yingling, my mozzarella sticks, and my chicken tenders, I don't give a shit about much else.
Well, then also you're talking about the Alamo Drafthouse, which actually does spend a little bit more on their maintenance because they don't run a giant chain, because they sell full restaurant type stuff, so they have better margins. So they do spend a little bit more on upkeep.
They could spend a little bit more on some peanut oil for those chicken tenders, though, because their chicken tenders are a little meh.
So this happens to any movie that's independent that ends up getting a big hit following. You're going to be in those bad theaters because the independent distributors have no clout and can't get you moved into the nice ones. So that's where your sound system will go out. It'll be
that makes a lot more
roofs.
sense, actually. I was so confused, like busting out my tinfoil hat because it seemed weird, but that
So
actually explains a lot.
No, and never ascribe to conspiracy what can be explained through ineptitude, right? Like it's if the easier explanation is that it's just lack of maintenance for the lowest end theaters, and that's where Sound of Freedom is, it's not some conspiracy. It's just movie theaters are being cheap. And let me tell you, the pandemic was probably even worse because over that 18 to 20 month period, if you thought you had no money to maintain the back end theaters before, imagine if you had
you
no
got
movies coming
a
out.
whole lot of no money now.
If you're the movie theaters, you're kind of screwed, because I can tell you right now, AMC would love to have Sound of Freedom in probably their top 4 screens per theater location.
Yeah.
But because of these distribution contracts with these large companies, they have no room to move that Sound of Freedom to different theaters.